everybody, I'm Jammer, and welcome back to yet another new Nintendo Switch Pro leak rumor video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned tomorrow for the next Nintendo Switch Pro leak video. Anyways, thanks for watching, and that's it. I'll see you tomorrow for the next leak video. I'm kidding. Alright guys, meme aside, I actually do really want to talk about the Nintendo Switch Pro stuff that's been going on lately. If you've been on the internet, if you've been on any sort of Nintendo Twitter timeline, whatever, I'm sure you've heard something about the Nintendo Switch Pro that people have been going crazy about. I mean, news articles have been talking about this for like the past 2 years now. So you know what? I'd like to break some things down. Let's actually talk about the Nintendo Switch Pro, what the heck's going on here, and I'm gonna give you my thoughts on what you could actually expect at all in regards to this situation, because let's just say I have some words. Oh, and I know that was a joke at the beginning, but you can subscribe if you want. I mean, we do Nintendo stuff here, lots of it, and if they eventually do announce it, I'm sure we'll talk about it soon, then react to it, whatever. You know what, let's just get into the rant, all right? So for the past 3+ years at this point, stirring around the internet, there's been this idea of a new Nintendo Switch Pro. Not necessarily a brand new console, but a new Switch that is more powerful than the current Switch lineup, that can potentially run games better, that can potentially run and output like more higher fidelity games. Basically taking the Switch of what it is now, but making it just a better Switch, right? And so Bloomberg, as well as many other news sites, have been reporting these leaks, these rumors, these blah blah blahs. They're not even leaks. They're more really rumors more than anything. There's been some Nintendo insiders kind of commenting on it, giving hints, saying that something's going to come later down the line. Okay, there's a couple of things I need to break down. First of all, Nintendo Switch iteration. The idea of a new Switch in general, that's not news. We've already had 2 iterations of the Switch since the original one came out. There was the original one, right? And then later on the road, they had the Nintendo Switch Lite, which many of people have now, of course. That's the one that, you can't dock. It's only handheld mode. And then there was an iteration to the regular Switch. They didn't, like, rebrand it or anything, but now every new Switch that comes out nowadays are the new ones with the new extended battery life. The launch edition Switches are no longer in production. Those are the ones that have, like, I think, like, 3-ish hour battery life, while the new ones have, like, 5 to 6. Give or take, depending on the game, depending on your brightness settings, of course. But there was a revision to the current regular Switch, right? Okay, and with all these rumors about a Nintendo Switch Pro, the idea is supposedly it's going to be a new Switch that's going to be more powerful than the current Switch. Man, here's the thing, okay? People always look back to the example of how they iterated the 3DS and the DS for that matter. There was the launch edition 3DS, then there was the XL with bigger screens, then there was the new Nintendo 3DS that had the better processing power, that had the little control stick nub, whatever. So yeah, there is a precedent of Nintendo iterating on their consoles and making minor adjustments and improvements along the way. So a lot of people are taking the idea of like Nintendo iterating on their previous consoles and seeing, oh, of course they're gonna do it with the Switch, and they have already. They did the Switch Lite, they did the new battery Switch, and so a more powerful Switch coming down the road eventually, I mean, that's kind of just like given. Like, looking at it big scale, like, yeah, I think eventually down the road, it's likely that we will see a more powerful Switch come down the road. But I think the problem right now, with all these rumors and all these people getting a lot of expectations for what they hope is going to get announced, thinking it's going to get announced like this week, or at E3, or whatever, lining up all these specs, predicting and hoping how it's going to run, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. Looking at those other previous iterations, they have always been very, very minor adjustments. People are hoping that this new Switch is going to have, like, VR support, 4K, small bevel, crazy internal screen, blah, 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 processing power. And here's the thing, like, if it goes down that route, first of all, it's going to be way more expensive than a Switch needs to be. It ain't going to be a $300 price point. You're looking at almost probably, like, $500 for some crazy Switch that could output some stuff like that. Plus, it's going to just be huge, because you got to remember, this is still a handheld console. And then there's people been talking about, oh, maybe it'll be like an only docked version, like it's not a handheld. But that's like the opposite of everything the Switch has ever marketed for. So there's no way that they're going to be getting rid of the handheld element of the Switch. That's the whole marketing brand point of its switching. People also talk about how like, oh, the Switch needs to compete with like PlayStation and Xbox now that they're getting these new, more powerful consoles, blah, 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 right? And the thing is, Nintendo doesn't compete with PlayStation and Xbox. PlayStation and Microsoft compete with one another. Of course, they're the top of the line. They're the industry highest standard of video game home consoles, but the Switch isn't really a home console. Nothing really competes with the Switch. There is nothing really else on the market that directly competes with how the Switch functions, being this, hybrid console of being an at-home console, but also an on-the-go handheld. The demographic of people who use the Switch use their Switch in totally different ways than everyone else. Some people, even if they have the regular Switch, exclusively use it in handheld mode. They never plug it into a TV. While on the opposite side of the spectrum, there's people like me that typically, I use mine primarily mostly docked. Mostly because, I've been at home for a while, at least for the past year. I used to use it handheld mode, but lately, I'm exclusively using it in the dock. And then there's people somewhere in the middle, and that's the thing, is that there's a lot of different kind of people who use the console. And while one person might use it exclusively docked, there's other people who are completely on the opposite side of the spectrum that only use it handheld. And so the reason I'm saying all this is like, the idea of a Switch needing to be more powerful, needing to keep up with these new next-gen consoles is not a thing. Yes, the Switch is less powerful than the PS4, let alone PS5 in this new next generation, right? But the thing is, it's not competing with those consoles. It doesn't need to be as powerful as these new consoles. The Switch is and never will be a replacement for getting an Xbox or for getting a PlayStation. It's definitely serving the function as like a console you get on the side that offers a different experiences than you could get on these next-gen consoles. So the reason I bring that up is because when people are talking about, oh, give it 4K support, oh, give it this crazy processing power so it can run these new next-gen games, it doesn't need to do that. It's offering a different kind of experience for players because it's of that handheld nature. But the most important thing to think about is there are a lot of people in the last year that bought a Switch, that in the last year especially bought Nintendo Switch Lites because they are easier to obtain, that just barely got into the Switch ecosystem within a year, right? They got it for Christmas, got it over the holidays, they got it over the past year, and that's the thing to think about. If there's a new Switch that comes out that has better processing power, whatever you have it, right? Whatever can run on the new Switch Pro, every game that runs on the new Switch Pro has to be able to run on a Nintendo Switch Lite and the regular Nintendo Switch. And I know as soon as I say that, people are gonna be like, oh, well, what about the new Nintendo 3DS that had some exclusive games? Yeah, it had like 2 exclusive games that I don't think sold that great. I mean, it sold fine, right? It sold probably pretty good. But you gotta think about how much bigger the Switch's audience is now. How many more people have adopted into the Nintendo Switch ecosystem? Here's the thing, if they announce Breath of the Wild 2 at E3, and they talk about the Switch Pro, and they say, hey, sorry, this game's exclusive to the new Nintendo Switch Pro. If you want to play this game, you have to buy the new console. If Nintendo does something like that, they'll be completely shooting themselves in the foot. They'll be closing the door on millions of sales of the game. Because not everyone can just go buy the next console a second year in a row after just barely getting it, right? So what I'm trying to say here is whenever there is a Nintendo Switch iteration that'll have some sort of processing power upgrade, blah, 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 it can't be enough to leave behind all the people who are currently in the Nintendo Switch ecosystem. That's the thing to think about. It would be wildly stupid of Nintendo to announce a Switch that has these exclusive games, especially exclusive big games, and leaving behind all the people who just barely got into the Switch ecosystem. If and when they do announce a Nintendo Switch Pro, what I realistically think is gonna happen is like the internal screen, like the touch screen, rather than a 720p screen, maybe it'll be a 1080p screen. It'll be like in a higher resolution, it'll look nicer in handheld mode. Perhaps the bevel itself will be a little bit thinner, so that it's like not as big and blocky around. You know, this is all catering features for people who primarily play handheld mode, right? As far as docked mode, perhaps when you dock it, taking advantage of perhaps a better processing unit inside of the Switch, maybe it'll just speed up load times, or maybe help with frame rates and stuff, especially in handheld mode versus docked mode. Really, all that I can see coming from a Switch Pro is some just minor adjustments to kind of just make the experience a little bit better when you're playing. Because the thing to think about is the more improvements they add to the Switch, the more higher fidelity tech that they put inside the Switch, the more expensive it's going to get. And that's one of the greatest benefits about the Switch right now, is that it is a more inexpensive console. It's easier to get into the ecosystem to be playing Switch games. So when people are rumoring and leaking and talking about this 4K output, this VR support, this crazy blah blah blah, it's like you're getting your expectations up for something that there's no evidence of, and there's just some rumors and some people talking about it on Twitter. All I'm trying to say with this video, it's probably in your best interest and the entire Nintendo community's best interest to level expectation. Will Nintendo eventually iterate on their console? Will we get a new Switch? Sure, probably. Will we eventually get an entirely new console generation past the Nintendo Switch? Definitely. It's not time for that. No, not at all. They've already gotten so many millions of people into the Nintendo Switch ecosystem. It makes no sense to be moving on. I saw an infographic talking about like how when the Wii launched and the Nintendo Switch launched, and like it's been like basically the same amount of time since the Wii U launch and the Switch launch. So theoretically, oh, that means they could be working on some new console. You gotta remember, the Wii U was a failure. They were trying to get out of the Wii U as fast as possible. A better example is to look at the 3DS. Look at the Wii. Look at how long they held onto those consoles before finally moving on. I mean, they were still making 3DS games multiple years into the Nintendo Switch's life cycle. That's like 8 some odd years since the original release of the 3DS. And I think that's very realistic to see something similar with the Switch, considering how much of a financial success it's been, considering how many people have Switches, which leads to how many potential sales Nintendo can continue to get. With so many people having the console, it only makes sense for Nintendo to keep making games for the console so then they can keep getting more sales, rather than making a new console to then convince people to now buy the new console and then buy games again afterwards. It's a lot lower of a barrier of entry for players and consumers to already have the console and buy a new game than rather buy a brand new console and said new game. It just costs way more that way for the consumer, and it's not realistic for people to be able to buy each new console iteration. Alright, I've gone on a long time with this rant and whatever. All I'm trying to say is people need to chill out about this new Nintendo Switch stuff. It's a little ridiculous, and I already know when Nintendo E3 rolls around, whether they announce it or not, or when they eventually announce it, I just feel like there's going to be a lot of salty, a lot of disappointed fans, and people are going to be very upset because this falsified hype is being like generated for something we don't actually know exists, and even when we do know exists, it might not be what people think it is. So I think your best bet for now is just enjoy your Switch that you have, enjoy the games that are on it, and then when a new one comes around, you can make a decision then if it makes sense for you to want to upgrade or keep playing on the one that you currently have, because I truly do think that whatever new iteration comes out, whatever ends up happening, there's no way Nintendo's going to leave behind Nintendo Switch users, especially Nintendo Switch Lite users. That's really the best framework you got to think. Everything that runs on any new Switch going forward has to also be able to run on the Nintendo Switch Lite. So anyways, I think I'm done here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the Nintendo Switch Pro, Lite, rumor, whatever stuff. Definitely let me know that in the comments below. Be sure to give this video a big awesome like. Haven't already, definitely subscribe for tons more on Switch stuff. We're going to be live streaming the E3 presentation when that comes around, and we're going to be reacting to that, so maybe stay tuned to that kind of stuff. And of course, we'll be talking about all the new games and stuff and all the fun stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm like looking forward to all the new stuff that's going to be announced. I know I'm like being really negative in this video, but I am very optimistic and excited. But my expectations are leveled. Go in with low expectations and you'll always be surprised. Anyways, as a reminder, we do live stream every weekend at 10 a.m. Eastern right here on YouTube Live. That's both Saturdays and Sundays. My schedule is going to be a little bit all over the place for the next couple of weeks. I'm kind of like out of town a couple of these weekends coming up, so it's going to be a little bit all over the place, but your best bet, keep up to date on everything we do in regards to channel. Follow me over on my socials. That's where I post when we're streaming, and if anything comes up and I have to delay it or whatever, so definitely check that out. Anyways, I think that's about everything for me for now. Thanks again, guys, so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!